Hello everyone, Coach Carole here. Today I'm taking you on a little journey through storylines. These to me are the prompts, new ways to rediscover and reinvent the way you're writing your stories, your ancestral stories, for your blog posts. This is part of the modules for the coaching in ancestral storytelling that you can find at my academy at coachcaroleonline.thinkific.com. In this session, I'm going to go through a set of 10, maybe 11 different storylines that you can use to plan your ancestral stories. I've recently written a blog post about this at my website at Coach Carole Online. Let's go to the first set of creative ways to think about writing your ancestral stories. And the first one that comes to my mind is themes. And within themes, the first person I often think of is Amy Johnson Crow. She is the owner and designer of the 52 Weeks, 52 Ancestors program. This is free to join, and anyone can take some of the themes from her recommendations each week, each month, or likely throughout the year. The themes for September are ideal to make a start on this. The theme is exploration. Amy also provides more detailed themes for each week within that month of September, from exploration through to road trip. And you can choose any one of those to write about your ancestor. So you would write that blog using the theme to set the scene for the content and inspire the story. It can be short or long. I'm liking the idea of a road trip because that fits in very well with my ancestral trails, which is another theme that I use for writing my blog posts. You could imagine yourself taking a road trip around the places that your ancestors lived and writing about the events, the places, the scenes that you might find along that road trip. So themes is a really good way to begin to think about planning your ancestral stories. If you want to join the 52 Weeks, 52 Ancestors, just put that into Google and you'll come up with the full year's list from Amy Johnson Crow. So it's a good one to start with. It'll keep you going. Don't be daunted. You don't have to do it weekly. You can take it monthly, or just lightly every now and then, pop in and see what the theme for that month is. It just might inspire you to write that next story. The next storyline comes under the heading of styles. An unusual choice this time, because I found when I was doing my research that a style might be a way in which you approach writing your blog post. And I popped over to have a look at what Natalie Pithers was doing in her website for the Curious Descendants Club. And Natalie is prescribing that there are really 4 main categories of styles in writing, and these can apply to your ancestral story writing as well. And they are persuasive, narrative, expository, or descriptive. So what does she mean by writing style? In the persuasive writing style, it's, as she says, a type of writing about being persuasive, convincing, arguing, or justifying. So an example for your family history persuasive writing might be a blog post arguing the benefits of checking newspaper records for details of your ancestors' life. What about expository style? This writing style is usually explanatory or sharing of information or concepts. You could use this style in writing about the research that you've undertaken for your family history mystery. A descriptive writing style is exactly that. It helps the reader to imagine the person, the ancestor, in the place and in the time that you are writing about. It uses sensory information and literary techniques. So this could be a passage or a post which is nostalgic, a look back in time about the childhood that one of your ancestors may have led. Narrative writing is all about plotting characters and bringing out the story to convey a message. So this, for your family history writing of blogs, could be the start of a biography about your great-grandfather. So those are the styles that you might consider in writing about your family history. Coming back to my slides now, let's move on to the next storyline, which I have named occupations. And this includes people's jobs in various industries, as well as their military experiences. In your research of your ancestor, you may have found just a snippet of information about the job that he or she had from a census report. You might go off and research about that job, how it's changed over the decades, or how your ancestor may have fitted into that industry, whether it be a boot maker or a tailor or a candle maker. This will give your story a new line, a new purpose. You can be using your blog post to describe what it was like for that ancestor to work in that industry. The next one would lead you to writing about stories of war experiences from the point of view of your ancestor. Doing military research can lead you to finding a myriad of things about your soldier, airman, or naval officers' experiences during the wars, either the Great War or World War II. This will give you plenty of information to write up a blog post about what it was like for your ancestor to be away from home and fighting for his or her country in a foreign country. Military experiences abound in our historical records, so you'll find a lot to help set the scene and tell the story of your ancestor during that war period. The next storyline is travels. Now, I've split these into two types of subcategories, and you might want to consider those individually to write about if your ancestors migrated from one county to another or from one country to another. This might lead you to write stories about what it was like to be on board a ship that sailed from one country to another in the 1800s, 1900s, and so on. You might be delving into passenger lists to find information about when and where your ancestors set sail. Travels in this case would be quite emotive. You could use your storyline to talk about the trials and tribulations of the ancestor during that migration, either planning for it, during it, or their arrival in a strange new world. So you could create a whole story about the migration of your ancestors. The road trip is another that you might consider in this theme of travels. And you might use my ancestral trails as an example, where you're taking the reader of your blog post on a journey into the village, the town, or the country where your ancestor lived, taking them on a journey through the sights and sounds, a visit to the various buildings of importance, such as churches and graveyards, and take them with you on your journey of writing about their life in this particular place. I find that writing about the travels of my ancestors intriguing. It expands my imagination on what it would have been like, given the style of transportation that was available at the time. The first time that a train came into that town where your ancestor lived, for example, would be an exciting event to write about. Or it could be that your ancestors were involved in the transportation of people and how they did that, whether it be by coach or train or boat. Lots of different ideas that you could use to talk about and plan your stories around road trips. Every time you find a piece of information about where your ancestors have been and how they've travelled there, might spark another story for you. The next in my list of storylines is the A to Z. This is a very simplistic approach to writing blog posts about your ancestors. Some of my favourite bloggers, Geneabloggers, write their blogs according to the surname of their ancestors and work their way through from A to Z, if there are people with those names with that letter at the beginning. And this gives a structure to your blog site. So a person who comes along to read about someone with the name beginning with A might like to follow up to find out about those ancestors with the names beginning with B. And it keeps you on track. It gives you a nice structure, as I said, and helps you to provide the reader with something different. You can talk about absolutely anything to do with your ancestor, but in this case, all you're doing is structuring it so that there is a synergy and a lineal approach to writing your blog posts. The A to Z could be absolutely anything. It doesn't have to be family names. It could be place names, or it could be particular names within a family grouping. You know, how did so many people in your ancestry come to have the same first name? So many Marys, so many Williams. So A to Z gives you a nice, simple approach to planning your blog post process. Next in my list is something a little different. This is called One Place Study, and you might use this as the starting point for writing your blog posts. You might be researching those people who have lived in a particular house, for example. So your blog post might be about one house address. Who's lived there? What are the changes that have happened over that time? What did the house look like? Maybe you need to do some extra deep dive into social history to find out a little bit more about that particular house address. Census results can also be useful in your research here. I know in my own family that there are certain addresses that were long stayers in my family groupings. And so being able to write about a particular house address might give me the opportunity to write about the inhabitants from one generation to another. You may take the point of view of a street or a precinct or village as your one place study. And this will take you into a whole heap of social history that you could write about for your blog posts, including your ancestors' particular experiences living in that street, precinct, or village. What's changed over time? What have they had to contend with? What are they grateful for? And the things that they have seen and done in that era, in that street. You might delve into history books there that give you a really fine focus on a particular area. I know from my own point of view that reading books about Hook Road, which was a place where my ancestors lived in the suburbs of London, have become an intriguing source of information for me to think about what my ancestors would have experienced living in that busy precinct. You could widen it, of course, and use your place study to be a town, a county, or a country that your ancestors lived in, and use the history of the era to form the context of your story about that one place. Now, is it different for them now after migrating from one country to another? What was it like to travel between counties in your particular country? And what was the town like over time? And think about how your family stayed in that one town, or perhaps moved around the towns within that 50-mile radius. So a one-place study, that's going to take you quite a bit of time, but it might form the basis of your writing of your blogs. It will give you another form of structure, if you like, for your blog posts. A similar one is the one-name studies. These usually feature a focus on the surname within a family group. So in my case, a one-name study has been done for my paternal ancestors in the Allery line, A-L-L-E-R-Y, and that's where I found a lot of information about my own ancestors, and I'm forever grateful for that person who has done that one-name study. So if you go to the one-name studies online and enter your surname, you may be surprised to find that someone else has already written about that particular family group. It might be related to yours. But for you to write your blog posts relating to the surnames within your family group might be another way to start planning and plotting who and what you'll write about. What significance are there in their surnames? Where did they come from? How were they influenced by their ancestors? And this might apply not only to surnames, but to first names. How do some of the first names get handed down through one generation to another? What are the meanings within that family group for perpetuating those first names? So blog studies of this kind, or blog posts of this kind, will keep you going for some time, focusing in on those names. In my own research, I have done a great deal of writing about my Allery ancestors. There were many of those who were in the tailoring industry, and that allowed me to focus in on the Allerys as tailors in the 19th century. Another way to plan your blog posts is to think about special events. Now, they could be your local social history, such as special events in that town or village that you're writing about, or it could be international events that have affected everyone in the world, such as wars, pandemics, and industrial upheavals. And your local social history can also provide you with another avenue for your research, a new way to look at your lives of your ancestors within their own local precinct. What was important about that event, and how did that impact your ancestors at the time? Was it the coming of electricity to that era, to that area for your ancestors, and how that might have impacted their lives? Or what was it like to travel by train for the very first time? Or what was it like for those who were left behind when many of our brave men and women left to go to war? So those big events really give you heaps of ways to tell your stories. You could drill down to events that are simply family occasions, such as weddings or memorial events or family picnics. You may have photos that will help you tell the story of a special wedding that took place. Or maybe it's a way for you to gather details about your ancestors' marriages, where they took place. Were they in churches? What kind of churches? Other family occasions, such as the birth of a child or the death of a child. Those occasions will give you sad stories to tell about your ancestors and help you to find words to describe their own personal challenges in their lifetime. And finally, storyline number 10 is an interesting one that you might want to consider as an overall purpose or structure, if you like. I'll just move myself over here so you can see my writing. So family history books. Consider each blog post as part of a chapter or a whole chapter that you might include in your family history book. You've got it all done in blog posts over a period of time, and all you need to do is convert those chapters into a whole book. This would be ideal for you if you're setting out to leave a legacy for your family and you want to be sure that people are going to read your family book. So using your blog posts as separate chapters and thinking ahead to how they might look in your family history book will give you an idea of how to sequence them and how to illustrate them, and what purpose will these chapters have in illustrating the lives of your ancestors for your family to read about. And finally, you might want to consider your blog simply as a website for collecting your family history research. There are no rules against writing about the way in which you research and giving facts, names, dates, and special events. These two also are worthy of a spot on your family history website. So using a tool like WordPress gives you an ideal location for setting up a family history website. Blog posts might be involved there, but you can also have pages, and you can then divide your particular family history into family groups or eras, or use one place studies, one name studies as the structure for your website. What you are doing then is building a legacy for your family about your family history and leaving it as a website that they can visit at any time. So these are my 10, 11 strategies or new ways to reinvent the way in which you deliver your or plan your family history blogging. They're different to what I have been talking about in the rest of the modules. They're new, they're fresh, and I make sure that I'm keeping up to date with my own research to find out what other people are doing in writing up their blog posts. So definitely keep these 11 strategies in mind for ways of reinventing your family history blogging. This has been a masterclass for you in the Coaching in Ancestral Storytelling course, and it has been provided for you free of charge today for those who want to visit and get more of an idea of what the course is like. So I hope you've enjoyed this short trip into storylines, and hope that you will come over to our Facebook groups and pages for Coaching Ancestral Storytelling. You'll find us at the Digital Storytelling Online Facebook group. And of course, come over to coachcaroleonline.thinkific.com for entrance to your academy. The Ancestral Storytelling is available all year round as a self-paced module. And this particular month, I'm including masterclasses that I do occasionally throughout the year, so you have an added bonus. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy your research and family history blog writing.